Well, hello everybody. It's Camille and the Studio Birds here with something a little bit different this month from my video. I am going to be doing a time lapse of the making of my most recent book, which is a book called Saint Lucia. And so I thought I'd just kind of take you along and see the different steps and processes and all the things that I do to create a book. So I usually start out with images, and for the St. Lucia book, I did a lot of research into different types of greenery. Here I'm tracing a drawing that I did of live oak with an acorn, but I also looked at different images. Here you can see some eucalyptus as well as some boxwood. Had a lot of fun doing some live drawings of things that I'd collected, but also some drawings from photographs. And here I'm just kind of beginning the composition of how this will all come together. I've drawn all these things individually in my sketchbook, as you can see underneath there. And then I use a piece of tracing paper to kind of begin to put it all together compositionally. So here I have the finished drawing, and I'm going to transfer it onto a linoleum block, and that's what I use to carve. And I'm using this great yellow transfer paper, which means that as I draw on the drawing, trace over it on the top, it miraculously transfers it onto that gray block. And I've used this piece quite a bit. I'm pretty frugal in the way that I use my supplies. So as you'll see when I lift it up, it's probably time for a new piece of transfer paper. You can see there that it didn't transfer real clear. So I needed to go over it, which is kind of defeats the purpose of the transfer paper with a little bit of Sharpie marker. So here I am kind of clearing that up so that once I start carving, I'll have a really good idea of where my lines are. And you can see that I'm going over each of those lines and have thought ahead of how each of those lines will be carved. Is it going to be with a white background or a black background? And when you carve, the way it works is whatever you carve out, here I'm using a carving tool, whatever you carve out is going to be white. So keeping that in mind, I'm putting in some texture on the leaves and kind of playing around with linear pattern and values by that carving. And here's a little more of a close-up of that, and you can see how I've kind of worked on the other leaves, and I'm just using that tool to carve this battleship gray linoleum, which is what I choose to carve on most times. And it's real methodical. I really enjoy doing it. And you can see here just finishing up the last bit of those leaves. I work at my carving bench and I use a light, and here I am adding the seeds on that seeded eucalyptus. I use a light, and it just, especially in the winter, helps keep the linoleum warm. And so there, I'm done. And you can see the finished image here. And now I'm going to go ahead and ink that up so that I can print it and use it as an illustration for my book. So I'm getting a nice thin layer of ink and then rolling that onto that finished plate that you saw me carve. And you can see, as I said earlier, that everything I carved with the carving tool is white, and whatever I didn't carve is black. So I inked that up, and you can see that I set it on the left hand of that press over there and put the paper on top. And I'm just going to add a sheet over it to help with the impression. And I roll that through. This is an old, well, yeah, I guess it is kind of old bunch etching press, and you can see the final image. And then I take that image and I scan it in. I use my scanner and I bring it into my computer, and I cut out all of the white space so that it is like a hole, a transparency there. And then I begin to build the cover colors. Here I've just taken a picture of that seeded eucalyptus, and I just sample those colors out of that, and you can see that I'm just using my mouse in the beginning to fill those areas in with those different sampled colors, and realized, oh, I should just fill the whole thing in. Why go through all those separate leaves? So I filled the whole thing in with the neutral color, and then I'll go in with the highlights and the shadows, and I'm just sampling it out of that photograph to get all the different values of that eucalyptus leaf. And I've switched over to a pen. I'm using a pen, and that works a lot easier for me once I start getting into details. And I am working on the seeds of those eucalyptus. You can see those all come up. I speeded this up 4 times, so it's not so tedious, and you can kind of see how things come together. I many times work on these types of drawings for 5 hours, 6 hours. It takes me quite a bit to get things exactly the way I want them. Do a lot of layering and doing one color over the top, and then adding transparencies of colors. So my colors typically aren't laid on at 100%. And I'm using the application Photoshop to do all this coloring in. Sometimes I also copy photographs, and you'll see that in just a little bit, and use that as well to add texture as well as the color. So here you can see I had 2 photographs that I took of grass, and you can see that they give it a lot more texture than just a flat green box. And I'm making all the pages. So here are the pages for the individual Petal book pages, and you can see that some are patterned and some are not. Going back to the original drawing again, playing around with some of the pieces compositionally to finish the last of those Petal book pages. And those Petal book pages will all combine to form the final book. This is a book that doesn't have a whole signature. It's more of an origami fold book as opposed to a traditional Coptic stitch or a pamphlet stitch book. So I've finished, found all of the compositions that I liked. I'm moving it around a little bit to find out where I like it the best. And there you can see that I'm picking now. I'm not quite sure. Looks like some of them are similar. Some I decide to use and some I don't decide to use. And then I go back and manipulate it a little bit more and find something that I like. So I'm just kind of figuring that all out. And you can see I'm getting close to finding it. Yep, and I'm doing the background. So each of the pages also have a background, and so I've created a large background. So each of those pattern pages will have that green as a background. And here's a use of a photograph to add a little bit more visual interest and texture. This was a live oak leaf picture that I took a picture of, and just adding that over the top and playing around with the transparency on that and how I like that, and just makes it much more interesting to me instead of just flat colors and textures. So kind of playing around with the transparency of those. And here you can see. So when I'm finished, I have a couple of pages. One of the pages, as you will see here, is all of the final pages of the book, and I've even added some text, as you can see there. And then the second page is the candles. That's kind of how I did this, is there's a little addition to this petal fold book. That's why I called it an altered petal fold, because you see me folding one of the petal fold pages here, but each one of those pages will also have a candle in it, and that candle is inset, and here is the candle. So I fold that candle in half, that candle piece, and it's a pop-up. I made it a pop-up by the way that I folded and tucked that candle piece into the petal fold. So here I'm clipping the piece so that it more easily folds over. There I fold it in, and see how it's completely inset into the book. And so that will be something that will pop up as you look at the book. So here's how that piece, that inset piece, will go into the book. And I just paste those in on either side. Here's another piece, and I'm just insetting, folding that in. I'm going to glue it. And those pieces, those candle pieces will, oops, put it in upside down. Those candle pieces will pop up then when you open the book. So here I'm just trimming those candle pieces so that the candle tops, the flames, will fit nicely into the fold of the book. I've completed the rest of the book, so this is just the last couple of pages that I'm showing you here. And the last page here, you can see up above that I created a cover that I just picked up is the cover, and used some moss that I found around my house. I'm tucking it into the cover. I made the cover a little bit bigger than I normally would, just to kind of completely conceal the little overlappings of the candles. There's just a tiny bit of overlap there. So there's the whole book. I'm putting on the string and the pretty green button for the closure on the book. I'm just tying that up. And then I'll show you what the final book looks like. So you open it out, and each one of those little joints where I have the petal fold pages has a little pop-up candle. So you just open those up, invert the folds, and then you end up with a greenery wreath with all of the candles. So this is my book in celebration of St. Lucia, and I love St. Lucia wreaths with the candles in your hair and the whole idea of bringing light to the time of winter and solstice. So hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.